Hey there guys, this is Obsidian Chill. Got another video for you today. And in this one, we're answering a question that I've kind of indirectly raised a few times in a number of past videos in terms of comparing DC to being a pay to win or pay to compete or however you want to describe it. I've touched on artifacts in terms of the damage comparison between using ranks of 80s to 120s to 160s to 200s and what kind of damage you can see as you progress and how much damage you actually get from using max artifacts. And this one, we'll be taking a look at skill points. So we've always talked about the question, or people have concerned themselves in the forums with, I need to have, as a CR skip gets you about 85 to 90 skill points in that range, depending on the extra stuff you want to do. And then players have, I think the max right now is just below 800, like 790 something. So when they see that, they're thinking it's such a huge insurmountable mountain to progress to that high skill points. And really, I want to show you that you don't actually need hardly any skill points at all to do your role as a DPS. I'm not talking about like tanking, healing, or controlling in this video. We're focusing on the DPS, which is obviously by far the most common role. So in this video, I've taken an Earth rotation. I haven't used Dervish just because Dervish, I want to make sure that there's enough comparison between them. I want to make sure in the rotations and the parsers it's not like a large gap in damage. So Dervish, it's hard to get exactly the same number of ticks each time, and Dervish will skew the strategy card procs as well. So it's in the rotation. I don't or in the loadout, but I don't use it. Some people don't use it as well. So all I've done is used Robot Sidekick. We've got Transformation Strategist and Quizlet. I would be using, like if I was doing a raid with supercharges, obviously I'd have Eye of the Gemini and stuff like that, but for the purpose of this video, I'm not doing that. I have maxed artifact spec, maxed allies. I'm doing a rotation of Tectonic Break, Clip with Unstoppable into Jackhammer, and just kind of, and then doing it continually. Doing that, as you'll see here, for 10 parsers at 30 seconds, so 300 seconds worth of DPSing, or 5 minutes. So let's take a look and see what those numbers actually show us. Okay, so these results are meant to show two factors. One, the power of pets. So like artifact pets like Quizlet and Grim, we're looking at Robot Sidekick. In this example, we're not talking about pet DPSing like Crystal Fury, Source Shard, all that kind of stuff, but same concept. So with this damage, max XP, so I have 340 skill points. My might is about 185,000. Loadout, equipped allies, and my artifacts. Doing 10 parsers of 30 seconds. My breakdown in terms of damage was 55.6 mil, and then Quizlet did about 5.4, and my Robot Sidekick did 4.2 in terms of the damage it contributed in that time. So for an overall total of 65,464,330, with an average crit of 38.5. So now, dropping down to the opposite spectrum, we're going to 0 skill points. So my might is 160 versus max is 184, so I'm losing like almost 25,000 in might. Quizlet and Robot Sidekick did about the same, 5.4, 3.8 versus 4.2 and 5.4. So the pet damage, they're still contributing the same amount of damage in that time because they're based on my CR. And in terms of my damage, I was about 49 for a total of 58. Moving to 100 skill points, so I moved from 160, I moved to 173, so I gained about 13,000 might. Everything else stays the same. So when I say 100 skill points, I am talking about taking the criticals. So that's 60 skill points. You need 1 skill point for your weapon. You need about 5 skill points to take Dervish if you're using that rotation, or you can just take technically 1. And then you need 3 or 4 skill points in Iconic. So you're going to have to take like Heat Vision, Neo Venom Boost sometimes, Word of Power, etc. So all in all, when I say max skill points, I'm talking 340 plus this 65 or so. So you're looking at probably at least like maybe 405, 410 skill points with this build. And with 0 skill points, we're talking like 65, which is well within a CR skip. A CR skip tune is sitting about 85 to 90 skill points, depending on how much extra stuff you buy, like styles. So 100 skill points right now, this is technically a total of 167 or so, 170 skill points spec'd. And then my might, same thing. Quizlet, Robot Sidekick stay the same, 5.4, 3.9. I moved to almost 51.5 mil. And that same crit rage at 38, total of 60. And moving up to 200 skill points, so this is like 270 skill points spec total. Same thing, Quizlet Robot Psychic, the exact same. I'm at 51.4 because my might didn't really, from when you reach 100 skill points, you get the 10% increase, which is why there's such a big gap between 0 and 100. But from 100 to 200, you don't get any percentages. It's just a stat increase. So 100 skill points to 200. So 100 skill points only got me, what's that, 1,000, 1,300 skill, like 1,300 might. 1,300 might, that's like less than an OP item. An OP item gets you like 4,000 might these days increase over your previous stat. So 100 skill points really amounted to nothing. And that's why you can see here from 60 to like 61, I got like an extra million and a bit. So jumped in the summary where we're kind of explaining everything here. So number of skill points, 340. My might was 184. So specking no skill points versus max, my might changed by 13.45%. So a 13% drop in might. When I spec 100, I only lost 6%, and when I spec 200, I lost 5.5. So really, that's not that much of a decrease in might. So if I'm missing 140 skill points spec in might, and really the only difference that makes up is 5.5%. And this is not including like augment buffs and content. This is including like a nitro and a mega. Like there's other sources where you can buff yourself to make up for that might difference. And as you can see here for the damage, so my 340, my max spec was 65.4. When I spec'd 0, I only dropped 10.86%. So I lost 11% damage by not specking 340 skill points in might. Or about 400 and, like I said before, like 405, 410 for the full build. And then when I spec'd 100, I lost 7%. And when I spec'd 200, I spec'd 6.5. So what I'm driving at here is that it kind of reinforces the fact that skill points largely mean nothing in this game. I see all these threads on the forums and everyone's talking about how like it feels like for new players it's like an insurmountable mountain. When they come to the game, they get a CR skip, which is like 80 skill points, like I said, like between 80 and 85 to 90, depending if they buy some other stuff in the House of Legends. But they feel like they're so overwhelmed, because they see these players with like 750, 800. I think the max skill points is probably just under 800, I believe, like 790 something. But they see all these people with like 600-700 skill points, and they feel like they have no chance of catching up, because it's just so much work they have to do. And I'm literally showing you here that you don't have to worry about that because it's not actually worth it. Unless you're like a completionist or on a min-max, that's sure. But you're only getting, like I said before, you're only going to get less than 10% worth of damage increase. However, this is for my artifact damage comparison video. If we look at artifacts, so if I go from baseline, if I'm going from 0 artifacts to 200, the percent increase of damage over my baseline rotation was 50.9%. And even going from no arts to 80s, I went up by 10.68%. So if I spec 0 skill points into might, 0, like I'm a fresh tune, I only have like 70 skill points, enough to spec the criticals, and that's it. But I get 80 artifacts. The difference is really completely, the gap is marginal. Like there's really no difference. And then as you get skill points, sure, you can start putting them into might and then gaining a little bit. But as you can see, it's drastically more important to level your artifacts rather than worry about feats and skill points, because that's just how this game is now. It's all focused on artifacts and allies. That's why for this test, I'm having max artifacts, because it is realistically feasible for a new player to buy a CR skip, wait for like a sale or something, and buy artifacts, spend like a few $100, buy 200 artifacts. And that's where you're sitting. You're sitting at only like losing 11% in damage compared to if you spent, weeks and months with leagues and groups farming feats to be able to get to 300, like 400 skill points to be able to max out your role. So this just focuses on DPS role, because obviously if you're support, you have more factors like dominance and health for tanks and vitalization and health for buff troll, stuff like that. So this is just focusing on DPS, because after you spec 340 skill points, it's just bonus. It's a little bit different for Prec DPS, because Prec DPS will use effectively more might and Prec at the same time, so that's why it's handy for them to spec both. Myself, I just spec into health for survivability. I can't even count the number of times where a DPS has died sitting right beside me and I've survived in elite because of my health. because I have drastically more health than them because I've got, you know, I've got max skill points in might, and then I've got nearly max or max in health. So for me, I'd rather take that survivability trade-off because, you know, a dead DPS doesn't do any damage. But I know other DPS spec prac and like they would help with your weapon taps and stuff like that. But what I'm trying to show you here is that artifacts means a lot more than skill points. Skill points largely mean nothing. In the past, skill points did mean something. You know, it's all about stats. Now it's where they say stats revamp is all a lie. Now it's all artifacts and allies, which I've mentioned tons of times in other videos, but at least now you have the numbers right in front of you. You know, you get massive increases in damage in terms of using the same baseline rotation versus like rank 80, 120, 160, 200s, where if you rise up these skill points, 100 skill points, like think how much time it takes you to earn 100 skill points, and that really only gained you like 0.5% increase in damage. So it's only like a 0.5% difference in damage by speccing 100 extra skill points in might, which went from like 10,000 to like 11,441. So it's like 1,300 might, like I said. So all the time you spent to get those 100 skill points, buying time capsules, feats, you know, farming raids, you know, farming stuff with leagues and group runs, all that time, where if you just would have focused on, you know, your artifacts or you know, unfortunately, you know, breaked out your credit card, then you could have had that same gap covered easily just by your artifacts. Like I said before, it's not always about 200. You know, if we're same thing, if we're going from like rank 120 to 160 artifacts, that's still a 15% increase in damage, where, you know, you only lost 10% by not speccing by not speccing 340 skill points into might, you only lost 11% damage, where you're gaining 15 just by ranking up your artifacts from 120 to 160. So it's just kind of food for thought. I know a lot of veterans understand this. They know the game's kind of progressed into focusing on ally and artifact damage, but this is more focused for like new players or newer members to DC. Don't stress out over skill points, because as you can see, unfortunately, you want to focus on leveling up your artifacts, because your artifacts are going to increase your potential for damage drastically more than skill points. So we'll carry on this conversation in the comment section. Take care, guys. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.